What's going on, everybody? This is the Rogue Ranger here, coming at you with a review of Transformers 1. Now, if you don't mind dropping a like and subscribe, it really helps. And of course, spoilers ahead. Now, as a general film goer, I'd say it's a very enjoyable experience, especially if you like the Transformers brand in any way. The animation is great and the characters are fun, but one of the best points of the film to me is we finally get to see a Cybertron that isn't worn, torn, and desolated. It's vibrant and lived in, unlike in other media, giving us new insight into Cybertronian culture. The voice acting is great, truly letting us feel the emotions of the characters, and the story is compelling. These are just my general thoughts, but as a huge longtime Transformers fan, let's get into my deeper thoughts and criticisms on the film. I think the plot is pretty straightforward, of a group of protagonists discovering extreme corruption in their society and then proceeding to try and expose it, while also depicting how Optimus and Megatron went from brothers to bitter enemies. However, it's in the last 20 minutes of the movie, the plot and pacing overly ramps up, probably to parallel D16's increasing radicalization, but I'll get to that later on. I think the reason why the plot moves so fast in the last act is because they tried to adapt and fit too much of the lore into a little over an hour and a half runtime while still simplifying the plot. If you look into all the different versions of the lore, which you can get through watching Chris McFeely's The Basic series on Transformers topic here on YouTube, shout out to him and his work, which is a godsend to any Transformers fan. The film tries to give basic quick rundowns of Primus, the 13 original Primes, the Quintessons, the Matrix of Leadership, the origin of the Decepticons, and how Orion became a Prime. Most of these topics, which could be their own story, are kind of crammed in and rushed, and probably should have been saved for sequels. Now, I don't think Hasbro really knew who their targeted audience was, or didn't really have faith in them, and this opinion of mine comes from the fact that after 7 live-action movies, they decided the prequel story of how Optimus and Megatron went from friends to bitter enemies, a pivotal story, would be animated. It definitely would have taken more time, money, and effort, but they definitely could have made the movie look like the opening scene of Bumblebee. And don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who think animation is just for kids. Just because a story is animated doesn't mean it can't be mature or thought-provoking. Animation is a medium, not a genre. However, it's probably because there are no humans to quote-unquote relate to, Hasbro assumed it wouldn't appeal to a general audience, and tried aiming at a younger demographic. After all, that first trailer's tone really did come off as kiddie, and it unfortunately turned off a lot of people from giving the film a chance. As for the characters, let's start off with the main character, Orion Pax. He's optimistic, inspiring, and does what's right no matter protocol. However, though they got that part of the character right, I have to be honest, that guy's not Orion Pax. That's Hot Rod. Despite all they got correct about Orion, they also made him a reckless and rebellious youth who grows and matures into a leader. Those are traits in a character arc usually associated with Hot Rod, or to Unicron Trilogy fans, Hot Shot, when most versions of Orion are usually cool-headed. Now, despite what I just said, I don't actually hate the changes made to Orion Pax, as long as they stay within this incarnation of the character. Now, I don't know the future of the franchise or if a sequel is in the works, but if Hasbro decides to make this movie story the general origin for most, if not all, iterations of Optimus, that's just not going to work for me. There's no way I can see this movie's version of Prime going on to become this guy or this guy. Definitely not this guy, and for damn sure not this ultra-violent maniac. And lastly, this has to be said, any longtime fan of the franchise is aware that most versions of Optimus die and come back to life at least once, which has unintentionally given the character a messiah archetype. But the scene where Orion becomes a Prime takes that and runs with it up to 11. I don't think I've ever seen a blatant display of Optimus Jesus Prime in the entire franchise than that very moment. D16, who we know eventually becomes Megatron, it's nice to see his former bond with Optimus on screen. Here he's portrayed as kind, fearful of consequences, and of course sympathetic, in contrast to his future self. However, I think his transition into Megatron is just way too abrupt in my opinion. I know they're going for the repressed anger direction with his character, and the reveal that most of what he believes in being a lie driving him to vengeful and villainy. It's just that usually when a character goes through the descent from hero to villain, when handled well, the signs to watch out for are there before the catalyst. It usually has the hero wondering if they could have prevented it. His anger towards the idea of primes is also incredibly misguided when all the misfortune in his life was caused by Sentinel, a false prime who he rightfully murdered. However, once Orion becomes a true prime, which solves most of the problems, as having the Matrix allows Energon to flow freely instead of having to mine for it, making the final battle kind of pointless. Also, this version of the character doesn't really show the same levels of ambition and power-hungry megalomania that's usually associated with Megatron. He's mostly vengeful and revolutionary, making it hard to see him go on to become other versions of the character. Alita 1 I think is fine with her development, from only concerned with her own ambitions, actually willing to let Jazz die in the beginning of the film, to actually caring about others, becoming selfless. She's also the best fighter in the film until Orion and D16 get their power-ups, raising the question of where did minors learn to fight. However, where I draw the line is when she bullies Shockwave and the High Guard into helping her and Orion. Any Transformers fan who knows their stuff knows how much of a menace Shockwave is. It was borderline of Mary Sue, especially when she tells Orion she's better than him at everything except expiring, which, if were true, would basically make him a figurehead. B127, who will go on to become Bumblebee, is a motor mouth, obviously, and version of him losing his voice in most popular iterations, but as the comic relief he can get annoying with certain jokes overstaying their welcome. My biggest head scratcher with B is they're against Megatron executing Sentinel, but B is clearly shown decapitating. It just creates a real tonal inconsistency. As villains go, Sentinel Prime isn't all that really impressive, but the fact that I disliked him enough for all the backstabbing and didn't feel any sympathy at his death means the writers did their job right. He definitely got what he deserved, especially when he's pathetic enough to beg D16 to team up with him after everything he did to him. The High Guard, an order of honorable warriors that served under the 13 original Primes, being made up of future Decepticons is just not adding up, especially with their might makes right ideology. Now, despite all the criticisms I laid out, I still love the movie, and it's filled with so many Easter eggs from throughout the Transformers franchise. I hope it does well enough for more animated projects and Transformers films that take the franchise to new heights and better popularize its storytelling to the general audience. And I'd recommend it to anyone at least bit interested in Transformers. Now don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This has been the Rogue Ranger, and have a nice day.